Monday. Time for
Memes.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
come get cake on your velvet cape. Here are
Meme Day.
Mondays.
Welcome back, players. I'm Jack with 36 Cancel, and this is Coco the Wise Cat. It's Monday, folks, so you know what that means. Well, nothing really, to be honest, but it just so happens to be the day I chose to do my next Meme Deck Monday, and it's a slimy meme today, players. This is the red and blue deck from that time I got reincarnated as a slime, featuring Milim, Rimuru, a little Shizu, and of course, the meme-tastic Ifrit the Burninator. So we know the red slime features Milim, Shuna, Benimaru, Shizu when she's crying upside down, and some side characters. But we also know that if there's one thing red slime actually does, it's burn your ass. So what better way to meme it up than just make a deck that burns you forever and tries to kill you before you even refresh your deck for the first time? Well, that's a tad unrealistic, but this deck does have the ability to just push to the endgame with a single ability. Of course, it wouldn't be a meme deck if that ability didn't deal 6 unavoidable damage to you when you use it, and make both players lose the game at the same time. Let me explain. This is highest ranked Flame Spirit Ifrit, 2-1, 8k, and some text. When he attacks, you can pay 2, pitch 2 characters, and choose a card in your clock and put it into your level zone. If you pay this cost, you deal 4 damage to your opponent, then you deal 4 damage to your opponent, and finally, you deal 4 damage to your opponent. And then, if neither of you are dead, you proceed with the attack. See, here's the thing. Part of the cost of its ability is to put a card from your clock into your level zone. Even if you're level 3, you can pay the cost and go to level 4. But wait, don't you lose the game when you hit level 4? Well, not at that exact moment. See, thanks to a very complex set of rules that comes into play when you're creating a card game with so many abilities, there's a little detail about when you actually check to see if you meet the condition of losing, which is having 4 cards in your level zone. Strangely enough, losing isn't an interrupt action. I won't bore you with the rules details, but the point is that you get to resolve the ability before you actually lose. And if both players are level 4, and you're not playing a top 8 match at a series tournament, you both lose. So when you feel like it, you can just YOLO for a tie or a win. Positively meme-tastic. So you'd imagine the rest of this meme deck will be built around resolving Ifrit, and you're somewhat right, but you're forgetting a very powerful demon lord, Milim. Milim in Slime has ways to burn your opponent for big damage, and you can bet you're going to find them here. So really, the point of this deck is big dick damage, and you know I'm all about that big dick damage. But the thing about big dick damage is it takes some big dick energy, so the rest of the deck is actually about building up all the stuff we need to pop off. Luckily, Slime is pretty good at putting things on the stage for free, building stock, and just being cost effective so we can spend everything when the time comes. So let's dive in. As you can see, there are a lot of familiar faces at level 0, but as soon as we go into level 1 and beyond, it's a totally different ballgame. Slime's level 0 lineup is great, and it's got a lot of free advantage in hand filtering, which is what we want. But as for the rest, well, since our strats are so different from the conventional game plan, everything is turned on its head. So before we wade into unknown waters, let's get our feet wet with a level 0 game. Starting with a very familiar face, we have After the Battle Rimuru. On play, pay 1, clock 1, and search for a level 1 or lower character. It's a great ability, and to top it off, he's got another. You can pitch a card on play and bounce a level 0 character anywhere on your opponent's stage. There are a lot of situations where this will help you get a leg up on your opponent, and it searches out what we need. It's a staple, short and sweet. So let's move on to another staple. Rimuru Tempest, level 0 from the trial deck. On play, he has 2 hand filtering abilities. First, you can top check, and if you see a character, you can add it and then pitch 1, and then you can ditch a climax to salvage a character. As good as these abilities are, and on top of the fact that this is another Slime staple, this card is even more important to us because it's very important to turn spare climaxes in your hand into characters. You'll see why later. Now, a few more familiar things here. Head of the Monsters Rimuru, the level 1 or higher on death Akatsuki. He also gets plus 1k if you have 2 or more characters. It's yet another level 0 Slime staple, and while it's not nearly as busted as the original namesake for the ability, it's still an important filtering tool for us. Next on the lineup, and at the tail end of the blue and yellow portion of our level 0, we have Power to Protect Friends Rimuru. It's a base 2k clean cut that's also an anti-runner. It's the fusion of 2 very powerful abilities at 0, and it gives us a lot of potential to generate advantage, and importantly, it keeps bodies around to swing with, because we don't want to expend too many resources before it's time. Now I want to move to the red portion of the level 0, which is the color in Slime that's less talked about, but being it's so meme-tastic, it's going to be the lion's share of what's to come. That said, red isn't without its own staples that you can splash in most decks. Let's talk about some. We have Milim in her first appearance here, with another one of those level 0 cards in Slime that has 2 different good abilities. First, she's a level 0 Suicider, which, while basic, is still baseline good. And second, she's a stock swapper for 3 stock. When she comes in, you can pay 3 and put all of your opponent's stock into their waiting room, and then put the same number of cards from the top of their deck into their stock. This is a great way to decompress your opponent for an explosive finish, and it fits great into any deck. Do you know what else fits in any deck? Drop Searchers. Slime has one, and it's Milim. 2500, and no other abilities. While it's not super impressive, never underestimate a drop search's ability to make your turn exactly what it needs to be. Now finally, we of course have a Brainstormer. It's Shuna, appearing as a tap self-salvage Brainstormer that bombs a character in your opponent's center stage for 500 on play. Shoutier from Overlord, a set which is hitting my doorstep soon, has the same text. And while she's not my favorite girl by a long shot, she's very popular and has quite the expensive SP, so I hope I pull her. Anyway, tap self Brainstormers are good, and we all know that, so we can move on. Now that we know a little bit more about the deck, we can move to level 1, and considering the singular goal of this meme deck, it's pretty varied. But rest assured, all of these cards are to make sure we can go off. There is a level 1 combo though, so let's start there. Imperial Wrath Milim is a Jean clone, 5k base, climax combo with a gate. On attack, if you have 5 or less stock, you can top check 4 and add a character. It's never been amazing, but it's also never been bad. It replaces itself for free, and it's on a gate climax, which gets characters back in our hand, which again is important for later. Now at level 1 of the front line, we also have Taking Attendance Rimuru, another level 1 with 5k base power and 1 ability. When you use an act ability, he gets the ability to top stock when he reverses an opponent. Now generally, these profiles are combined with back row supporters to give some sort of act power boost to make it more consistent and threatening, but sadly, Slime's not big in the power department. After all, Rimuru's main way of killing things isn't to become this massive, powerful being. No, this card is here purely because we have a lot of cards with act abilities, and there's an off chance to get 1 or 2 free stock per game, and that's a big help. So he's here. Now, speaking of act abilities, we actually have 2 level 1s to help activate that top stock ability Taking Attendance Rimuru has. First, we have Creating Potions Rimuru, back in his true slime form. This is one of those utility level 1s with a lot of text that's in your back row and does things. First, he has a Rest Pay 2 heal ability. You'll rarely use it, but it's nice to have. Mainly, he has 2 other act abilities that help you build stock. First, if he has no markers, you can rest him and choose a character in your waiting room and put it under him as a marker face down. And you can also rest him to put a marker under him into your stock. Obviously, this is meant to build stock over 2 turns. It's a bit slow, but it's more free stock and an act ability to help out the front row, which also builds stock, so they work very well together and very well for this deck. Now what else helps us in that department is Ranga, appearing as a 102k backup. Luckily, character backups are also act abilities, so this activates the front row Rimuru on your opponent's turn, and on top of that, 102k backups are pretty much never bad. Now, I know what you're thinking. We've gone through all of the support, but we basically haven't even touched the combos or memes yet. This is supposed to be a meme deck. Well, calm down, because from here, it's all memes. We're closing out the level 1 by sparking the fire that will burn your opponent into Inferno of damage. Manifestation of Ifrit, Shizu. When she comes in, you mill the top 2 cards of your deck, and if you hit a climax, you get to breathe on your opponent, which means you put the top card of their deck into their waiting room, and choose a card in their waiting room to put back on top of their deck. 90% of the time, hits a climax every time, but she's here to unleash Ifrit on your opponent, and if you pay 2 stock, pitch 2 characters, and return her to your hand, you can grab Ifrit out of your waiting room and put him on the stage where she was, ready to attack and burn our opponent into oblivion. Now make no mistake, this is highly expensive. The Shizu chains cost is huge, and we already know that the Ifrit burn ability has the same price minus the return to hand clause. But there are a few things that help us pull this off. First, since Shizu returns to your hand, you can use her as a card to pitch for the Ifrit cost. And second, Ifrit is on attack, so you can build a little more stock before you go off. And hey, if you have 6 stock, 6 cards in your hand, and 2 cards in your clock, you can do this twice in a turn at level 1. And really, since the whole deck is built to bring you to that point the best it can, it's very possible. Will this kill you very quickly? Yes. Will it kill your opponent? Maybe. Is it worth it? No, not even a little in most cases. But is it funny and does it have a chance of just blowing your opponent up? Yes, and that makes it worth it every time. Besides, pretty much nothing in the combo is expensive and you can build this shell for a pretty low cost. But we're not quite done. We also talked about Ifrit, so there's no need to go over the level 2 since that's all there is. So we can cap out with a level 3. As you can see, it's unusually small, but that's because, if anything, it's a backup plan for if Ifrit either doesn't work or you just don't get a good opportunity to use him effectively. But make no mistake, this level 3 is destructive as farting over a match in the California brush. And we can go back to Gushing Flames Shizu for that. On play, top check X where X is characters, and on attack, pay 3, pitch 2, and burn 5. Wow, that's a lot of damage. And considering it's combo and reverse free, it's a great way to close the game from the very weird state it'll be post-Ifrit. But really, Shizu is a backup plan, because we all know that Milim is the demon lord with all the destructive power in the world. We're running another combo-free finisher, Dragonoid Milim. On play, top check, and if you see a character, burn 1, and when another character attacks, she gets plus 1k until the end of turn, which is handy because on reverse, you can pay 3 to clock kick. Again, it's a rather expensive ability, but if you need it, you can't put a price on closing the game. especially with an ability like our last card has. This is Pursuit Milim, our level 3 climax combo. On play, she heals, which is cool and all, but how does she kill your opponent? The answer? With her climax at the end of this card's attack, you can pay 5 stock and pitch 3 characters from hand. If you do, deal 2 damage to your opponent and stand this card. This is probably one of the most expensive and violent restanders ever printed. Can you pay for anything else if you use it? Probably not, but will you really need to? This card wrecks face. If Ifrit fizzles out, this is your ace in the hole. Milim carries an insane power in that little body, and this card is a perfect embodiment of what she was in the show and a great way to cap out this meme deck. So why would we ever build this deck? Well, for the glory of Milim, of course. It's worth mentioning that if you take out Ifrit and add in some basic support cards, 8-gate Milim with a blowout top end also isn't a bad deck. But since playing bad decks is why we're here, how do we make this work? Well, the answer is to count and wait. They say the hardest part about playing Y4s is to count to 8. 8 being, of course, the climaxes in your opponent's deck, and keeping track of how many have left their deck. Hold on to your cards until there's enough of them that you feel like Ifrit and Milim could really punish them. Remember, you don't have to use Ifrit's ability if your opponent keeps compressed until the very end. It's important to build stock in hand early, but you can keep all that for the endgame if you want. After all, can you imagine getting multiple finishers in this deck off in one turn? That's just dirty. Other than that, keep some basic stuff in mind. Ifrit needs to be in your waiting room for the change to work, but you can pitch him as part of the cost. You'll also be able to pitch Shizu as part of Ifrit's cost if you use the ability, so it makes paying for each cost easier. Also, don't be dumb and try to use Ifrit's ability with no cards in your clock. It won't work. And obviously, don't pay the ridiculous price on any of these abilities if you think your opponent is going to cancel all the damage. If you're going to use Ifrit, the best way you can do it is try to catch your opponent at the worst time possible, probably a time when they're fairly decompressed on their first deck, and then get them to a game state they're not ready to deal with. If you see it, cash in, but if not, don't recklessly pull the trigger. When playing meme decks, be prepared to take the loss when they don't work the way you wanted them to. That's the nature of the game, but always sculpt your game plan to ensure maximum salt. Anyway, that's about where I'm going to wrap up this meme deck. Hopefully you'll see some games on the channel soon featuring it. As for me, I'm going to keep making videos and hopefully starting to get back in the tournament scene, even if it's just online. I've been pretty busy lately, but I'm never too busy for Weiss. After all, one of my favorite sets is due to arrive soon. I think you know what it is. And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.